that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. So lovely earth can stay lovely still.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey, me, and the famous Tom Fennell.
In the flesh?
In the flesh. We always start the same way. We say the same things week after week.
We got to get a new script ready.
And yeah, we do. Okay, every day I get on the internet, search for news relating to climate change and energy. And when I find articles that I find are interesting, I put together a 50 or 55 word synopsis. And we don't have a light on that camera, so I didn't know it was there. It's okay.
It's working.
It's working, it is. I put together a 50 or 55 word synopsis and a link to the original article. I package 10 to 15 of these together every day and post them on the internet at geoharvey.com, Geoharvey. We're going to be starting today's show on Thursday, May 4th. Today is the 11th, and so we're starting a week ago today.
There's a nice picture coming up
there
of
is.
Indian Point.
Indian Point. If you want to look at if you want to go to the original article, you can go to geoharvey.com and click on the date. We'll try to keep you informed of the dates. Or just scroll down. It's not that far down.
Well, some of these are very good and in depth.
Yep.
And you know, we could spend a whole show on
Yep.
some of the better ones here,
We
but
could
we don't
indeed.
have time. So I'll try and call your attention to some of the ones that caught my attention.
Yep. This first item comes from Forbes.
With renewables surging, nuclear and petroleum battle over subsidies.
This is an interesting one, you know. If the petroleum industry keeps fighting subsidies for nuclear power, the nuclear industry will go after petroleum industry tax breaks. The president of the Nuclear Energy Institute said, if people compare nuclear subsidies with petroleum tax breaks, nuclear will fare well. And
it's sort of a little bit like dancing on the Titanic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. The nuclear industry is very proud of the fact that they never get any subsidies. Well, they do now.
Well,
because
how about, what is it, Price Anderson?
Price Anderson has been around for a long time. It's like the federal government is giving them free insurance to the tune of...
Because they can't get insurance elsewhere.
They can't get insurance because the insurance companies aren't big enough to be able to deal with what would happen if, you know, a nuclear power plant went down badly in the United States. The value of the real estate that would be lost would be so much that the insurance companies wouldn't be able to deal with it.
And the fossil fuel industries get this wonderful tax break called the depletion allowance. Basically, you sold your oil, so you don't have it to sell anymore, so we're going to give you a tax break.
Yeah, because you don't have your product anymore. Yeah, okay.
And interesting bit about hypocrisy here. The American Petroleum Institute has lobbied against legislative efforts in several states to save aging nuclear plants.
Well, they're in competition with each
They
other.
are, absolutely, sure.
And they're both in competition with renewables. And by the way, that's clearly part of the reason why every renewable technology has got some grassroots organization that just kind of magically appeared to oppose it because it's not in the interest of the people. And you know, you think, what could possibly be wrong with rooftop solar? I mean, it puts power into the hands of the people. Well, go to New Mexico. Yeah, go to New Mexico and you'll find out that there are grassroots organizations that are trying to back, a year or two ago, it was utilities wanted to have a $100 per month connect fee for anybody who had a solar panel on its
I think
roof.
we talked about that.
We did.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, in Vermont, we've got organizations that are very profoundly opposed to wind power, solar power, in utility scale solar power, and I suspect any kind of hydro. And if you try to argue with them, they are just uninterested in talking about it.
Well, you know, way back when, there was a group of us up around Wardsboro in Jamaica
Yeah.
that were trying to develop two of the dams there, which are flood control,
Yeah.
into hydro.
Yeah.
And there was one guy kept showing up at our meetings and really ranting and raving about how bad an idea it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know to this day whether he had stock in the utility company
He had
or
an
not.
axe to grind.
He certainly had an axe to
You
grind.
have that thing about whenever a group people say that they're going to do something, somebody comes up and says, you can't do that. There's some saying.
Yeah, I've said something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Let's move along. We're going to talk about an expensive option for reducing U.S. CO2 emissions.
This is also from Forbes.
And it's an idea that sounds good.
Yeah, until you figure out how much it costs.
By the way, this is a long article, and
Yep.
there's a very good explanation about carbon capture and storage works.
Whoa.
The diagrams there and
Yeah.
everything, it's good.
Yeah. You got a title on it?
And I did, an expensive option
Oh,
for
okay.
reducing U.S. CO2 emissions.
Yes, that's right. That's what it is. While many technologies can reduce power sector emissions, carbon capture and storage has gained support in Congress. Well, of course it has. I mean, there's a lot of money involved. Analysis shows coal with CCS will always need significant subsidies, back to subsidies, to compete economically with wind and solar. And you know, this is just it is astonishing how much attention goes into this. There's only been 1 or 2 carbon capture and storage plants that have ever been put into use.
I think it's a smokescreen. It's just an excuse to use.
It's an excuse to continue mining coal.
Yeah, bingo.
And you know, I mean, Donald Trump talked about it as something that he would support. It's kind of like supporting.
Buggy whips.
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of like supporting fusion power. Billions of dollars have gone into it, and yeah, they've got a plant that will actually produce more power than it consumes for a period of about 8 or 10 seconds, which is kind of like having an operation where you spend billions of dollars on a light bulb that lasts a few seconds. But you know, the technology to get there is always in the future.
Well, this is something that came out of the article that I guess I've heard it so many times it goes in one ear and out the other. I never thought about it. Once a CCS storage site is full, the well must be sealed. Duh. And the area must be monitored for thousands of years to prevent the release of CO2.
Which can happen if there's a crack, if
Absolutely.
there's a leak, any
So,
kind of
you know,
leak.
this is like an Achilles heel here.
Oh, absolutely. You know, they talk about, I think it's 6 atmospheres of pressure, which is not a lot of pressure, will cause carbon dioxide to liquefy. That's the reason why you can hold liquid carbon dioxide in CO2
flask,
cylinders for fire extinguishers.
Yeah. There's liquid in there.
It's liquid in there, and you know, when you let it out, the first thing it does is cool off to the point where it solidifies. So you have stuff coming out looking like snow almost.
It's dry ice.
Yeah, it's dry ice.
It literally is.
And it will burn you if you get it on you. One of the things that has been suggested is put it into a plastic bag on the bottom of the ocean. Okay, so a clam comes along and bites the clam. I realize clams don't come along and bite
There
plastic.
probably is a solution, but we haven't hit it yet.
There's
it's
a
like
solution.
turning it into calcium carbonate or something.
I think the solution is to turn it into plastics. But the problem is, it's expensive.
Takes energy.
Now it takes energy, and you know, it's going to compete because the oil industry produces stuff that's turned into plastics. Anyway. Should we move on, Tom?
We should move along.
Yeah, I think so.
Internal White House debate on Paris Climate Accord caught up in legal issues.
This debate is just going on and on and on, and it's like, all right, legal issues are now the sticking point in discussions in the Trump administration over whether to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, according to a person close to the talks. The lawyers aren't sure whether the U.S. would expose itself legally if it remains in the Paris Accord, but decreases its carbon reduction goals. Well, I got news for you. The president, and we have this farther down, the president of France weighed in on this, and other people have weighed on it. This, by the way, came from CNN. And this is an ongoing story, and it's still
It's
today.
still it's going to be
still
ongoing
going
for a
on.
while.
It was supposed to be announced on Tuesday how he was going to deal with this, but on Tuesday they said, we've delayed this.
Well,
So,
he came out with it. It sounds good.
yeah.
Okay, and then somebody said, well, how are you going to do it?
Yes.
And every solution he's come up with, people say, no, you can't do
You
that.
can't do that. We're in the accord, and dropping out is not going to change that. And furthermore, we are going to face a bunch of problems if we try to drop out of that accord. And
Well, that's what this article is basically all about.
yeah. Okay, we're up to Friday, May 5th.
Public Service Board holds hearings on wind sound rules that would be the lowest in the nation.
Yeah, well,
And we got first-hand experience.
yeah, we
here.
did indeed. There's a picture of that
Yeah, let's
one.
get that picture
Okay,
up there.
the Vermont Public Service Board held a series of meetings on proposed sound standards for wind turbines. Actually, I guess it went through the week, and this was reporting after the hearings were held. The board released its draft version of new rules in March, and its members held 4 meetings this week to hear from the public and from wind and sound experts as they get ready to finalize the sound standards. And Tom,
we were both there.
We were both there, and we both talked.
We both gave testimony.
Gave testimony, and Tom held up a
Sound meter. Yeah, I got one.
and said, "Could we find out how much sound there is in this room when nobody's making any noise?" And the room went silent, and he said, "This is 40 decibels." 40 decibels meant that the sound of the silent room was unacceptable under the proposed
Well,
rule.
the proposed rules, this is from the rules, I guess, set a standard of 42 decibels during the day
Yeah.
and 35 at night.
So, and at the nighttime level was silent, was below silent, really.
Yeah.
There's a wind turbine manufacturer in Maine. They're not just wind turbine manufacturers, they do other things. It's called Pika Research, and they have a small turbine. Anybody who wants to know about it, you can look this up online. It's Pika. They have a small turbine, 1.5 kilowatts, which is designed to go at a home.
Yeah,
So
you put this up in your backyard.
that turbine was registered by the EPA at 37 decibels, which means that it would be too loud for the nighttime rule.
Anywhere in Vermont.
At 200, at 200, at 200 feet from the hub. And the first time it was tried, the test failed. The turbine didn't fail the test. The test failed. The test equipment failed to read the sound from the turbine.
Blowing through the grass.
Yeah, and the reason was because the wind was blowing through the grass, and that was louder than the turbine. Clearly, this is being done by a group of people who want to kill wind power in Vermont, and they also
That's my take on it. This is a stealth attempt to ban wind.
yeah, and some of it comes from people who are, for one reason or another, and I think that it's not good reasons, but not necessarily for money. Interested in banning wind power, and it's also coming from other people who I think are for not good reasons, that are to provide to make sure that the bottom line for certain industries stays high for the next quarter. Mm-hmm. And that's reprehensible. And when you consider, after that meeting, one of the things that I said in the testimony, I pointed out that another person dies from health problems relating to outdoor air pollution every 10 seconds.
Yeah, you said that.
And I made the point that during the time of the attack in Paris last November, 137 people were killed by terrorists, but during the same time, about 1,380 people, about 10 times as many, died from health effects of outdoor air pollution. So who's the terrorists? And when I got home, I sat down, I was contacted by a woman who wanted to know what my source was, and I was unable to find the source that said 1,380. I found a source that said 1,240. I found a source that said 1,440. I said, "Do you want me to look for that other one?" She said, "No, that's enough."
That's good enough.
But I thought about this further, and you know the concentration camps in Germany during the Nazi period ran for 12 years, and about 20 million people died during those 12 years. And the rate of death in the concentration camps was a little less than half of the rate of death from outdoor air pollution. Who is committing crimes against humanity here?
Good point.
Okay.
One little quick takeaway. We
Yeah.
got there to that meeting late,
Yes?
but during the time I was there, almost everybody talked for wind power.
Yes. Yes.
And it didn't look like it was an organized group.
No, and unfortunately, this Vermont Public Radio, because this report that I have came from VPR, doesn't it references the people who were speaking against wind, but it doesn't reference the people who were speaking for wind. Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Our next item comes from Carbon Brief.
U.S. tells China it has no plan yet to meet its 2020 climate target.
The U.S. has no plan yet for how to meet its 2020 climate target and has made no analysis of the impact of recent policy changes, according to an official submission to the UN. The U.S. submission for the multilateral assessment, which was published this week, says, quote, jobs, economic growth, and energy independence, end quote, are its priority. Now, I want to point out to the administration that it's going the wrong way, because if it's interested in jobs, economic growth, and energy independence, then it won't be talking about...
Renewables are the way to go.
It won't be talking about coal jobs.
Coal jobs down in Kentucky are rare. I mean, you've got one, you better hang on to it.
Yeah, well,
you're not going to be retiring.
If you have one, you better not hang on to it, because you're going to lose it.
Well, yeah.
You know,
don't quit. You know,
no, I'm saying
but
quit.
It's not
quit now. Quit while you're ahead.
Well, there's no alternative down in Kentucky. In the coal mining country, there's almost
learn to be a wind turbine technician and fly across the country.
Well, that's a different thing.
That's what's her name? Jessica Kilroy does. You know, we talked about her, the young woman who goes around the country fixing wind turbines.
The ones hanging from this rope making $100
and you know, if
a
you
minute or something.
If you can go underground, you can go above ground. And she was about 350 feet up, hanging from a rope, and talking about how safe the job was. And the average pay for wind turbine technicians, I should say median pay, it's not average. The median pay for wind turbine technicians is well above $50,000 a year.
Well, I think the starting pay is pretty close to 50.
Yeah. Okay.
Right now, it is a good career.
It's a good career.
There's a lot of potential there.
That particular career is putting on jobs faster than any other in the United States. We are up to still May 5th, Wind Engineering Magazine article.
I got Power Engineering, but is it the same?
Power Engineering Magazine. I'm sorry.
U.S. solar has grown rapidly over the last 6 years.
Yeah, I guess
well, if you watch this show, you know that.
Maybe they got this from the show. Utility scale solar installations grew at an annualized rate of 72% from 2010 to 2016. Let's see, at 72%, that means by 2023, the entire world would be covered with solar panels or something.
Well,
I don't know.
It's very impressive that it's growing so fast.
Yeah.
But it's still a small portion.
Well, bigger than they say. Let me finish reading this. According to the Energy Information Administration, though the first utility-scale solar plants were installed in the mid-1980s, more than half of all currently operating solar capacity came online in the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's exactly
now,
true.
Now, this is growth that is just phenomenal. You know, people talk about compound annual growth rate, CAGR.
It's growing very rapidly.
This is astonishing. 72% growth rate is like, it's almost like bacteria in spoiling food, or I don't know. It's really something. It's not that fast because they can reproduce every 15 minutes. But you know, this is really kind of amazing. So
it's the future.
It's the future. Should we move on?
I think we should. Saturday, May 6th.
Saturday, May 6th, and we've got an item coming up from KUAC. We've had this picture before, I think.
We've talked about this.
Yeah, we have.
This condition before.
Yeah.
This came from Alaska, but it's really about northern Canada.
Yeah.
Warming climate making boreal forests wildfire season longer and more destructive.
Decades have
And
been.
boy, that picture shows a destructive fire for
It doesn't
sure.
show you how big that fire was, though, because that fire was much bigger than you would guess just looking at this.
Oh yes, it was.
The thing that was scary about this fire was the picture of people driving bumper to bumper traffic, driving down 2-lane roads
To get out of there.
with fire on both sides
Yeah.
of the road. Decades of increasing temperatures in Alaska have lengthened the fire season and dried out vegetation, especially the forest floor, and created conditions for busier fire season with bigger and more frequent wildfires, according to one study. Other studies say increased lightning strikes will bring more fires, and they will be bigger. And
This picture here, and I'll bring the picture back.
Yeah.
That is Fort McMurray.
that is,
They evacuated 90,000 people.
yep. Something like 1 out of 6 houses in Fort McMurray burned
Something
down.
like that. And it eventually burned 90,000 acres.
Yeah.
That's an evacuation an acre.
Yeah, and when you have a fire as big as the ones in like Fort McMurray, what will happen is the fire will create its own tornadoes.
Yes, it does. Yes,
And
it does.
when that happens, the tornadoes will pick things up like burning lumber.
And spread the fire.
And it will take that stuff up. If it happens to be plywood or thin lumber, it will lift it to a height as high as 30,000 feet, where it won't have flame, but it will continue to have embers.
So it's still incendiary.
Which is how the Peshtigo fire, which happened the same day as the Chicago fire in I think it was the 1880s, managed to jump Green Bay, which is 10 to 20 miles across.
Okay, I
That's
never heard that one.
quite a fire break.
I bet it was.
Yeah. So, should we go on?
And this Fort McMurray fire
Yeah.
caused $3.7 billion in damage.
You know, that's what this article says, but I
Yeah.
looked it up after because I thought, that doesn't sound right. And I found another figure that said 9 billion.
Wow.
And the other thing is, I think it's hard to know. The 9 billion might really mean 7 billion because, you know, the Canadians have funny ideas about what a dollar's worth.
Yeah, you got a
Okay.
point there.
Should we go on?
Yeah, let's move along.
Our next item is from Seeker.
Missing EPA webpage could be violation of federal law.
You know, I got an email from a friend of mine who was talking about the liberals and their horrible political correctness. And liberals' political correctness? Are you kidding? When EPA's climate change pages were shuttered for revisions reflecting the administration's views. Views? They're more interested in views than they are in facts. Users were told they can check out a snapshot of the entire EPA site from the day before that Trump took office. But when you go there, you find in the archived snapshot, pages relating to climate change are missing.
Well, they were still missing when this article was written a week ago.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, a week after it happened.
Yeah.
Are they still missing?
I went to the EPA website
Yeah.
and I did find pages still on the website, not archived, but still present,
Okay.
that talked about climate change. But I had to look for them. Now, what's happening here is instead of politically correct, you know, where you're talking about something where usually politically correct talks about it relates to political pretty subjective stuff, people's ideas, their notions, their preferences. When you're talking about this, you're saying,
This is hard facts.
these are hard facts and we want people not to know them, so we're going
Yeah,
to move
yeah.
them out of here. And it's more important that people believe Donald Trump and Scott Pruitt than it is that people believe James Hansen or you know, people who are scientists.
Well, to them it is.
To them it is, that's right. Well,
The word is transparency.
yeah, the truth is going to bite them.
It could very well.
At some
We'll talk
point.
about that again.
Yes. Okay. Should we go on?
I think we should.
Argus Media, still May 6th.
The Trump administration enters coal-gas reliability fight. It's not about coal gas, it's coal versus gas.
US EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt said grid reliability is threatened by potential over-reliance on gas-fired electric generation. He didn't even mention wind and solar here. He said he believes we have a need for power plants to have fuel stockpiles, that means coal,
Yep.
nearby in the event of supply disruptions. Not that you can't disrupt the supply of coal, but you know, he thinks that the fact that you can stack it in a pile on the ground means that it's safe. The U.S. has lost 54 gigawatts of coal capacity and added 34 gigawatts of gas capacity since 2012. And I think we're going to have another...
I think they're grasping at straws to say this.
I don't know that they're grasping at straws. I think that Scott Pruitt is just spouting stuff out of his own imagination. And since he's an attorney, not a scientist, not a person with experience in power, the only reason he was put at the EPA was because he had experience suing the EPA. He doesn't know anything, and so the result of that is you get the rantings of a person who doesn't know anything. Not that I don't rant, but I know things.
It's interesting, though, because this is not a fight against renewables. This is the coal people fighting the oil people.
Yeah,
fighting the gas people.
And the oil people are fighting the nuclear people. You know,
as we already found out.
We're living in crazy times. I mean, we're living in a time when the official government policy of the United States is guided by, I shouldn't say it because it would indicate that I'd be doing a medical.
You're not qualified to
I'm not qualified to give a medical opinion. So I'm not going to say that the administration is guided by insanity. I'll just say it's guided by incompetence. Okay, we are up to Sunday, May 7th.
Massachusetts towns ditch standard electric service to embrace green power.
Yep.
And this picture is what town?
That is
We've
Gloucester.
seen this before.
We've posted this picture before.
This is
I really like.
Gloucester, right?
This is Gloucester.
And there's windmills already in the middle of town.
Let's put it up for people so they can
I'm
see.
looking at it here. Duh.
Yeah, this is from Wicked Local Brewster. I used to live down in this area. Some communities in Massachusetts are boosting their use of renewable energy, bypassing basic electric service to negotiate contracts with third-party generators. 2 of the programs are running already, and 8 more are under development. Those 10 communities' plans could result in 17 megawatts of new wind turbines. And here you can see the wind turbines kind of go
downtown.
up right. They look like they're downtown. That's because they're so tall. They're really a little ways out of the downtown, and they're in an industrial park, but they are in the community. But you know, they're not as close to the local hospital as the wind turbine at the Kiowa County Hospital in Kansas is.
No, that's right in the parking lot, right? Well, in case you're interested, I looked up the towns. It's in alphabetical order here. Arlington, Brookline, Dedham, Gloucester, Hamilton, Millis, I never even heard of Millis, Melrose, Somerville, Sudbury, and Winchester.
Okay.
And they didn't even mention Greenfield.
No, they didn't.
Which is doing stuff
Are
like
any of those communities on Martha's Vineyard? Because most of Martha's Vineyard is doing this.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I mean, this
is bigger than just this article.
Much bigger than just this article. But I think this is a fun article, and that
this is an interesting article. Interesting sentence here about how they're doing it. The utility providers, such as National Grid and EverSource, are still operating the power lines.
Yeah.
Okay. And they get to charge the customers for the power lines.
Right.
But they're not supplying the power.
Right.
Which makes sense.
It makes sense. And actually, 80% of the utilities in the United States don't generate power anyway. They just transmit it. So most of the utilities in the country are not going to have trouble once they identify the correct business plan of going to
times have changed. I mean, when it started, it was the utilities generated all the power with giant, like Niagara Falls.
Well, actually, if you go back a little bit farther, you find that when the utilities started, they were all microgrids.
Yeah, they were. Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay, we've got another picture coming up. Should we go ahead?
This
is from Tri-States Public Radio.
As coal jobs decline, solar sector shines. And we mentioned this already.
Yes, we have. The reality coal miners face is that coal jobs have shrunk 40% since 2011. What is growing is the number of jobs in renewables. Solar power accounts for just under 1.5%, and I put a note on this. Actually, it's well over 2%, and in fact, I would argue that it's probably over 3%. I'll get back to that, of electricity in the United States, and yet, according to the DOE, there are more than twice as many jobs in solar as in coal. Now, the DOE is saying that it's over 2%. This guy who wrote this article was using somewhat aged information, and things are changing fast. But the DOE estimates are for large-scale, utility-scale, and such solar, and they've only started looking at distributed solar very recently. So, and if you look at the charts of growth and so forth, it's clear that a fairly hefty chunk, possibly a third or more, of solar installed in the United States is not counted by the DOE. So I think it's probably around 3%.
Is this like the rooftop solar?
Rooftop solar,
they don't
backyard
even know it
solar,
exists.
they don't know that it exists. That's
I'm
right.
going to switch back to the picture here because
Yeah.
there's an interesting thing here.
Yep.
If you look carefully, you'll see factory fabricated supports for these solar panels.
Yes.
They're all over that roof. I
Yeah.
never noticed them before.
Yeah.
And it's indication of secondary industries that are popping up
Yeah.
because of renewables.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that is correct. So,
Something to mention here.
yeah,
Why can't laid off miners just switch to solar?
well, they
Okay,
can.
It makes sense.
They can. Yeah.
But there are major challenges.
Well, there's,
Okay?
you know,
I'll explain what he says here.
Oh, okay.
One of those is simple. It's location. When you're thinking about coal mining in Appalachia, oftentimes there are generations of families in these regions, and it's very difficult to pick up and move.
Yes.
You know, these people are entrenched in Appalachia. They're making
Right.
good money now.
Right.
And when that coal is over, and a lot of it is being over, because
Yeah.
you mine it, it's gone.
The mines are, yeah.
They don't want to move.
Yeah. On the other hand,
All my relatives are here in this holler.
that's
you know.
right. On the other hand, the coal mining has really destroyed the environment that they're in by doing things like removing the mountaintops and
Well,
filling
it
the
has.
valleys with rubble.
I've witnessed that firsthand.
Yeah, and another thing too is those flattened mountaintops, which are huge, can, and this is starting to happen, house a lot of solar power.
We've talked about that already.
And in addition to that, there are moves underway right now to put in pumped hydro stations, and it's like these are big stations they're talking about in Virginia. For example, the governor of Virginia just signed an act that would put, I don't know, a lot of pumped hydro. Pumped hydro is going to require a lot of people to work at building it.
Certainly while it's being built.
Right, and when you put up pumped hydro and you've got local solar and wind, you've got a big distributed energy resource, which
It's
in
a
Appalachia,
totally different
yeah,
model.
it makes Appalachia an attractive place to develop power.
Yeah.
So, and it's clean power, and these guys can work on it without having to worry about black lung disease. So, should we move on?
Yeah, we should.
We're up to Monday, May 8th, and we've got an item here from Power Technology.
European Commission endorses 3 French renewable energy initiatives.
These things are huge. They're amazing. The European Commission approved 3 schemes to support electric generation from small-scale onshore wind, solar, and sewage gas installations in France. The schemes will enable France to develop over 17 gigawatts. 17 gigawatts is a lot of additional renewable energy over the next decade, including 15 gigawatts of onshore wind power and 2.1 gigawatts of solar. And then
sewage. There's not much for
this
that.
small amount of sewage. They could get more out of sewage than they're going for, but they know how to make onshore wind. And 15 gigawatts of onshore wind is probably about 10 or 12 times the size of Vermont Yankee, do you think? In terms of the power output that it would produce? Vermont Yankee, I think.
500 into 15,000.
Yeah, but you've also got differences in capacity factor.
Yeah, capacity
So-
factor. Too much for haven't had enough coffee to figure that one out.
There
today.
you go. That's let's have some more coffee and then we can tell
Interesting
everybody.
thing about that, the solar support scheme is for small-scale photovoltaic installations in buildings below 100 kilowatts.
Yeah.
So this is bringing it home.
This is bringing it home, and you know,
And the sewage gas installations are small too, and it's cow power.
believe it or not, most of this is going to go in latitudes that are farther north than Vermont.
Yes, yeah.
You know.
Right.
So, and they don't exactly have the world's driest environment there. So, we are up to Manga Bay.
Let's get a picture up here. We got a picture coming.
Yep,
There we go.
mangabay.com.
This is a very good article, especially if you like pictures, because it's just loaded with pictures.
Loaded with pictures.
Trump failure to lead on climate doesn't phase UN policymakers in Bonn. Now look at that picture there.
Yeah.
People standing out there in the middle of the
Ice,
ocean.
yeah. Well, yeah, that's
I bet you they're fishing.
I bet there's scientists who are trying to find something out. Policymakers from nearly 200 countries are gathering in Bonn for talks aimed at fulfilling the Paris Agreement. They are unfazed by Trump's threat to withdraw from the accord. It seems likely China would step into the leadership gap left by the United States. There is...
Well, we've mentioned that before. It's inevitable, I think.
You know, I cannot imagine a single good result that we would have from leaving that accord. None.
I can't either, really.
You know,
It plays well in Peoria until you start thinking about it.
Yeah, and the only place that I think it would play well after you start thinking about it is in a certain office building in Wichita, where, you know, I'm assuming that's where it is, where I'm talking about the headquarters of Koch Industries.
Aha.
You know, they want to make sure that they've got their quarterly returns coming up on schedule, and you know, in 2015, I went to Wikipedia. There's an article called List of Largest Companies by Revenue. There were 63 companies on the list, and in order to make it to the list, you had to have revenues that were upwards of $100 billion a year, which, by the way, is bigger than the entire wind turbine industry. But of the 63 companies, 21 of them were in the oil and gas sector, and one was Koch Industries. Today, there's 52 companies on that same list, and Koch Industries isn't there.
Is that so?
And there's only 7 oil and gas companies.
Is that so? So the times they are changing.
The times are changing, and the oil and gas companies have had reductions in their revenues that have amounted to 30 to 37% in the last year. So this is you know, these people are in trouble, and of course they're making people sick and killing people every 10 seconds and so forth. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for them.
Well, if we walk out, there's still 200 countries left.
Yeah.
And 87% of the global emissions would still be regulated.
Yeah.
Okay? And to date, no country is suggesting that if the U.S. walks out, they're going to walk out, or that they're going to roll back their climate action. So it may be a moot point. It may not matter at all.
Yeah. And you know, I read an article today that talked about how, and it's not in this week's news, but it'll probably be might be in next week's news. It talks about how India has put on so much renewable energy in the last year that it looks like, and has so much coming in the pipeline, that it looks like they're going to meet their climate initiative goals without trying.
Looks like they're skipping the entire 20th century.
Yeah.
They're moving right into the 21st.
And you know, Australia has got a profoundly anti-renewable, pro-coal government.
Yeah.
And it looks like it might achieve its climate goal without trying. So,
very interesting.
You know, despite their attempts to prevent it from happening. This is the people who are investing in this thing. Donald Trump, I'm sorry, Donald, you're not going to save the coal jobs. It's just not going to happen. Then a year from now, it's going to be.
I think he realizes that now, but he was shooting from the hip.
Well, he after 100 days in office, he went to Pennsylvania and said, "We're going to save the coal jobs."
Yeah.
At some point, these people who are in the coal industry are going to start getting fed up with him. And when they do,
there's not much of the coal industry left in Pennsylvania.
Well, there's not much of the coal industry left anywhere.
Well, Montana, Wyoming, there's some.
Yeah, there is some there.
Appalachia's on it's borrowed time.
Yeah, and it's like when these people get upset at Donald Trump, what is he going to do? He doesn't have plan B.
Nope.
You know, he's going to have to go to the people in the coal mining industry and offer them the deal that Hillary Clinton offered them and they turned down, which is we'll train you for jobs in the renewable power industry.
Well, the bottom line is digging underground for coal is no longer economical.
No.
And it has nothing to do with renewables.
It has to do with buggy whips. Really. I mean, Donald Trump wants to make America great by returning to the thing that made it great 100 years ago. And unfortunately, that's 100 years out of date. Okay, our next item is from Clean Technica, still on May 8th.
Good outfit.
Yeah.
Climate Solutions Caucus brings Republicans and Democrats together over climate change.
Yeah, the Climate Solutions Caucus is a place where representatives concerned about climate change can meet to exchange ideas on how the federal government should respond to environmental challenges. We might assume that most of these people would be Democrats, but in fact, half of the caucus members are Republicans.
Well, there's a sneaky reason for that.
There's a sneaky reason.
If you want to join as a Democrat, you have to bring a Republican along. I don't know how they do that, but
I don't know.
But there's a lot of Republicans who understand that climate change is real.
Yeah. And
not everybody is a knee-jerk denier.
Yeah, and this brings us back to another thing, which is why we should, a reason why we should not leave the climate change, the climate, Paris Climate Accord, and that
has something to say about it.
If we leave it, we don't have a place at the table anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have no way of controlling what the rest of the world is doing, and we have exports, and they're going to start ignoring the fact that we've got exports.
Yeah.
And we're not going to use those exports in the United States because they're more expensive than any other way of doing things, aside from nuclear. So we are up to Tuesday, May 9th.
This is very current.
Yep.
Emmanuel Macron, I don't know if I said it right.
I think you probably came closer than I
vows climate action as French president.
Emmanuel Macron, a centrist, pro-EU French presidential candidate, won 2/3 of the votes in a runoff against the far right's Marine Le Pen. He promised to promote international cooperation on climate change in his victory speech. He supports ending the use of coal, a carbon price, and, get this, trade sanctions against polluting countries.
That's interesting.
We leave the accord, we're going to have trade sanctions from France, and actually a bunch of other countries have already said trade sanctions if you leave. This is from Climate Home.
Well, this isn't baked into the cake yet.
No.
He, according to the parliamentary system, which I really don't understand well, he has to assemble a government.
Yes.
And since he is from an outsider party, that's going to be difficult.
Well, yes.
I think he's going to do it because the alternative...
With 2/3 of the votes, I think people are behind him.
I think so, yeah. But it isn't, it's not baked into the cake. It's not automatic.
Not yet. So we have a picture coming up. And this is from
we've got a good article coming
the
up. The
Desert Sun.
Let me get this one up here.
The Desert Sun.
The deer and the antelope play.
The deer and the antelope. Well, in this case, it's just antelope, but I'm sure there's deer not far away.
Solar and wind are booming, just not in the California desert. This, again, is a good article. If you like pictures, it's a great article.
Yeah. The U.S. added more than 11 gigawatts of solar power last year, according to a report released by the Energy Information Administration. This means the U.S. has nearly 50% more solar power than it did a year ago. Now, this is a little growth.
A little bit.
Yeah. The American Wind Energy Association says the wind industry had its best first quarter since 2009. So there you have it.
There's a little bit of a battle going on here.
Yeah.
I mean, conservationists hailed the plan as a major victory for desert ecosystems.
Yes.
Which is true.
Yes.
But the solar and wind industries were frustrated, saying it would stifle the growth of clean energy at a critical moment in the fight against climate change. Now we're talking about California.
Oh, yeah.
And we've seen some very large solar arrays, particularly solar what do you call it?
Concentrating solar.
It's concentrating
Yeah.
solar. They have to be huge.
Yeah.
But they're in the middle of nowhere.
Concentrating solar does not have to be huge.
Well, we saw one in Spain it wasn't.
You can, but no, you can get concentrating solar that's small. I mean, like small enough that you could put it in your backyard. And the
That's
way
the
that
one
you,
with the tubes, isn't it?
with the tubes, yeah, you have a tube
Yeah.
and you have a parabolic reflector trough that reflects the sunlight onto the tube.
So it's doing the same thing using different technology.
Yeah, it's slightly
It's
different.
not a whole bunch of mirrors that concentrated on a tower.
Yeah, it's a mirror that's parabolic
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
concentrates
That makes
on a
sense
pipe.
too.
And I had a friend who tried doing that in a DIY situation. Oh, this was probably 40 years ago, and he couldn't do it. And the reason he couldn't do it was because he tried to use water as the medium, and it boiled too fast.
Okay.
You know. Okay.
Wow. Well, that's an interesting. I bet he was surprised.
He was a little surprised, yeah. But we had a friend who was an engineer who looked at this and said, "Of course that's going to happen. What's the matter with you people?" Anyway.
So he put crankcase oil in it and it works.
It probably would have worked better with crankcase oil, yeah, but it would have worked better yet with things that would be
Like silicone oil.
something that would operate at a very high temperature. They use salts that
Yeah,
that
they
have
melt salt, right.
in these things, and of course that means that you have to have heating coils that can melt the salt in areas of the pipe that are not don't get the sunshine, so you can get the whole thing started in the morning. And that in turn makes it complicated. And so it's really too complicated for a normal backyard installation. But it doesn't require a lot of huge technology. So
Okay.
our next item comes from Clean Technica.
Money talks.
Yeah.
$15 trillion tells Trump to declare victory and stay in the Paris Peace Accord.
Yes. More than 200 institutional investors worth a tidy sum of $15 trillion have just put the Trump administration on notice that climate change has put their assets at risk. The notice comes in the form of a newly published letter to the G7 group of 7 industrialized nations and the G20 group of 20 major economies. And they're saying, we're in trouble if you don't do something about this.
A little backstory here,
Yeah.
because it appears that this was organized by a group called Ceres.
Yes, that's
we've
right.
talked about.
We've mentioned that many times.
And the the bottom line from this article, I wrote this one because it's topical. We want to get me back.
Yeah, I
up
want to
here.
get you back up here so people can see it.
This came from the article. Assuming the Trump administration can shepherd the Clean Power Plan out of legal trouble, which we've talked about,
Yep.
President Trump can simply take the Obama Climate Action Plan and do what he does best. Put his name on it, call it beautiful, and hit the links.
Yeah, right. That's what it should be.
Hey,
Okay.
I wouldn't argue with success, whatever.
Yeah. Should we move on?
I think we should.
Okay, our next item is
coming locally.
BT Digger. Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. This is a local. This was actually the same thing that I was looking for a grant from, and Tad Montgomery was looking for a grant from, and we didn't get ours.
They beat you, huh?
They beat us. But this is.
This is about SIT.
It's about SIT.
They received a grant to add solar power and research. So
Yes.
it's an interesting combination.
The School for International Training in Brattleboro, Vermont received a $100,000 grant from the Wyndham Regional Commission to install a solar energy system. Its benefits will include enhancing the curriculum at the SIT Graduate Institute. The project will be installed in partnership with Dynamic Organics based in Putney, Vermont. It will, as you mentioned, also have a research arm going on, and
Yeah, they're researching what crops are appropriate for areas within and around solar panels.
yeah.
What can you grow there that makes sense?
Well, there are certain things that you can, obviously.
not corn.
Not corn. You know, I have been going over in my mind a comparison between, and I think I'm going to write an article about this for Green Energy Times because it just works so well. On the one hand, you have a utility scale solar farm. On the other hand, you have conventional cornfield. Say a farmer has 640 acres and he wants to go with either one or the other. The people who are against utility scale solar would say we don't like the idea of taking agricultural land and holding it aside for solar farms. We want it to be agricultural. Well, the fact of the matter is that the grasses that are used conventionally to graze sheep grow just as well, some of them do, in the shade as they do in full sun. And that means that if you have a solar farm, you can have as many sheep grazing under the panels as you do.
They've found that out in Ireland.
And in England.
Yeah.
I see this all the time.
Yeah, same thing.
On the other hand, if you have conventionally raised corn, they're going to fertilize that land with a chemical fertilizer. They're going to put in a weed killer like the Monsanto products. They're going to put in insecticides. They're going to put in fungicides. In other words, they're going to have a square mile of land that's just going to have poison dumped on it, stuff that's poisonous to people in addition to funguses and so forth. That land is just devastated.
Well, it's turning it into Dust Bowl.
It's turning it into a local micro
Dust Bowl.
Micro Dust Bowl, a desert. It's turning it into a local desert.
Yeah.
It's green because it's got the corn, but it doesn't have anything else. Birds don't live in there. Insects don't live in there for the most part. I would imagine that if you went into the soil, you'd find it had very few or no worms. This is not good.
Not at all.
Not good.
By the way, of course, SIT's my alma mater, of course.
Yes.
So if you go up there, you'd like to know where this is.
Yeah.
If you're driving past SIT, heading west, there's a great big hill.
Okay.
Nothing there but grass. And it's south-facing.
Yeah.
It is perfect. A perfect location for solar.
Okay, we are up to Wednesday,
the last day, huh?
Wednesday, May 10th, and we have an item from the Providence Journal. And that nice little picture is from Casco Bay.
That's a lobster boat.
That's right.
Lobstering to be trimmed to counter effects of climate change.
New restrictions are coming to southern New England's lobster fishery in an attempt to save their populations in the area. Numbers of lobsters have dwindled as climate change has warmed waters. An arm of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission voted to pursue new management measures to try to slow their decline. And one thing that I should mention is Casco Bay, people think of as being in northern New England.
But it's near Portland, isn't it?
It's Portland is where that is,
yeah.
And that's if you draw a line exactly through New England, east and west, dividing it from dividing a northern half and a southern half, it goes very close to Portland.
You mean like the boundary between Massachusetts and Vermont?
It's north of that. It's actually well north of that. Well, the boundary for the southern quarter of New England goes through Keene.
Okay. Southern quarter, huh?
Yeah, because Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts are so small.
Maine's pretty big.
Maine's got half the area of New England. Half the area of New England is in Maine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Nice picture.
They're talking about here, New England south of Cape Cod.
Yes.
The population of adult lobsters was estimated to be 1/5 of the total from the late 1990s.
That's a huge decline.
That's why they're doing it.
All right.
They don't do this because there's going to be no lobsters left at all.
Yeah, and I think anybody who is unconcerned about climate change but loves to eat lobster might think about this, because it's not just lobster that's going; it's a lot of other things. Okay. We should move on. This next item is one of the most exciting that I've seen.
Solar power tariff drops to a record low. Now, this is not from America.
No, this is the Deccan Herald.
From India, right?
This is India. Solar power tariff dropped to a record low of 2.62 rupees per unit, which is 4.05 cents per kilowatt hour, in an auction for Bhadla Solar Park in Rajasthan. The price is lower than the average price of power generated by coal-fueled power generating locally. Boy, I don't know, I shouldn't have let that one through. NTPC Limited at 3.20 rupees per unit. And it's, I mean, clearly it's like...
So it's about a nickel
80
compared to 4 cents.
Yeah.
And that was the previous low.
Yeah. The price is considered a major milestone toward powering India. And this is a big deal because solar power in India 2 years ago was probably double the price of power from coal.
In 2010, it was 13 rupees per unit.
Yeah.
And now we're talking 2.62 rupees per unit.
And that same
That's
kind of
significant.
that same kind of change is happening all over the world. And it's not just solar power, it's two other things that are very, very important. One of them is wind and the other one is batteries. And because if you try to do solar power alone, if you tried to run a country on just solar power,
couldn't do it.
You'd have a little bit of a problem trying to figure out what to do for
night.
electricity at night. But when you combine in wind and batteries, you can basically run on just those three.
Well, we've talked about exactly that.
Yeah.
We've talked about
And
what they call
now,
virtual utilities.
yes, and now we've
Well,
got.
there's one quick takeaway
Oh,
from
okay.
this one. We're going back to India.
I'll put back.
They're aiming to
that one.
generate 175 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2022. That is a lot.
That's a lot. That's
Okay,
right. Huge.
Especially a country didn't have much power.
Well, you know,
They're bringing power to the people in India.
I came across a beautiful picture, which is not in today, and maybe I should add it for next week's show. It shows a little market in India, the kind of thing that has an open front and a guy standing there,
Yeah.
canned goods lying around and stuff. And what has he got
Not much
hanging?
more than a tent.
Yeah, what's he got hanging from the rafters and one propped up against the counter? Solar panels.
Okay. Yeah,
They're selling solar panels and canned beans.
He's peddling solar panels. Yeah. And we've seen the women in Africa that were bringing the solar panels on back to donkeys.
And these people are
The
getting
new meets
electricity.
the old, or the old meets the new, or something
That's
like
right.
that.
And these people are getting electricity for the first time. And the really big thing that they talk about over and over and over again is the fact that the children can study in the evening without having to sit next to a kerosene lamp, which is expensive, but it's also bad for the health.
Bad for the eyes.
Yeah. So our last item is
Last
coming
item.
up.
We
and
got a
it's
good graph coming up.
That picture, this comes from Clean Technica.
Distributed solar PV plus storage market to exceed $49 billion by 2026. And there's the graph showing it.
Yes, this is a
And
graph, and this is
significant.
solar plus storage.
$49 billion.
I want to point out that the point where we are on this graph is all the way to the left. I mean, this is the growth that they are expecting, and honestly, I think they're conservative because the cost of solar power plus batteries has gone so low that
It's going to look more like a hockey stick.
I think it's going to be much sharper than this. Around 2020, it's going to be much higher than they're anticipating, I think.
It's interesting if you look at this map or look at this graph. The red is Asia Pacific.
Yes.
It's basically China.
Big growth in Asia
Big growth
Pacific.
there.
Okay, Navigant Research published its latest distributed solar PV plus storage energy storage systems report this week. It says global annual market for deployment of distributed solar PV plus energy storage is expected to exceed $49 billion and reach 27.4 gigawatts. And I want to point out that 27.4 is more than half of 49. So what they're saying is that solar plus storage is going to cost less than $2 per watt. That's what they're saying.
I haven't a reference for that. It's just a number to me.
Well, what they're saying is that 27.4 gigawatts of solar is going to be worth $49 billion.
Yeah.
So that means less than $2 a watt.
Yeah.
And by 2026, the largest growth is expected to be in the Asia Pacific region. Compare this, if you will, to coal or nuclear or natural gas, and you discover that solar plus batteries is by far the cheapest. And that can be done anywhere. You don't need to build a big plant and distribute the power, which means
you
the
need
power.
some land.
You don't need big power lines all over the place. So Vermont, do you want to save your ridge tops and keep them beautiful? The way to do it is not to say we're not going to put wind turbines up there. The way to do it is to put in distributed power and allow that
Not just Vermont, really all over the place.
Allow that distributed power to reduce our demand for power lines, because if we don't do that, we're going to have power lines all over the place.
I hate power lines.
I do too. Well, we should put ourselves up and wave goodbye
I
so that
think we
everybody
should.
can
Let's get
everybody
off.
can see our smiling faces. Bye all. See you next time around.